Welcome to the League of Women Voters Tacoma-Pierce County General Election Candidate Forum for Legislative District 26, Senate and House Positions 1 and 2. I am Lydia Zapeta, and this is Ruth Ogden. We are co-moderators for this forum. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County and our community sponsors, we welcome the candidates in the audience to this community candidate forum.
The League of Women Voters Tacoma-Pierce County acknowledges that we gather on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish peoples, surrounded by their traditional waters in the shadow of Mount Tahoma. We actively seek inclusive and respectful partnerships that honor Indigenous cultures, histories, identities, and current realities.
The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization whose mission for the past 100 years has been to empower informed and active participation of citizens in government. Candidate forums are one of the many ways that we do this. Anyone 16 years or older can be a member of the League of Women Voters. For more information on membership, go to our website, lwvtpc.org. That's lwvtpc.org.
The candidates in ballot order for Legislative District 26 Senate are Emily Randall and Jesse Young. For House Position 1, Spencer Hutchins and Addison Richards. For House Position 2, Michelle Caldier and Matt Macklin. The general election is November 8th. If you are not yet registered or have moved, you may register or change your address online at votewa.gov by Monday, October 31st. If you are already a registered voter and your address is correct, your ballot will be mailed out October 21st. Your ballot must be postmarked or placed in a ballot drop box by 8 p.m. Tuesday, November 8th. This forum is being recorded and will be posted at the League of Women Voters Tacoma-Pierce County website, lwvtpc.org. Questions have been prepared by members of the League of Women Voters of Tacoma-Pierce County and our co-sponsoring organizations. We invite live audience questions via text to 253-224-5691. Questions must be directed to all candidates and may be reworded or consolidated.
The timekeeper today is Terry Baker of the League of Women Voters Tacoma-Pierce County. She will hold up cards to let the candidates know when they have 60 seconds remaining, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and when it is time to stop. When you see the stop card, you may finish a short sentence. Please stay on gallery view so that you can see us and the timekeeper, Terry Baker. Please do not talk unless it's your turn. Please stay on mute. I notice a couple candidates are not on mute, and please turn your camera on, Matt Macklin. The audience is on mute and cannot use the chat function. A reminder that civility is expected. I ask each of you to confirm that you agree to the ground rules, which among other things include addressing the issues and not making personal attacks or comments. Please confirm by giving me the thumbs up. And Matt Macklin, please turn your camera on so that we can see you, and I want to see that thumb.
Well, I'll give you a thumb there, Lydia, but I'm not able to turn the camera on just yet. I'm still on the road in between locations, but when I arrive, I will turn that camera on. I apologize.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Each candidate has up to 2 minutes for an opening statement. After that, the order of questions will rotate and each candidate will be asked the same question. At the end, each candidate can make a 1-minute closing statement. The order of the opening 2-minute statements for Legislative District 26, Senate and House Positions 1 and 2 is ballot order. Emily Randall, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much to the members of the League for organizing this event and for everyone for participating. I love the opportunity to work with the League and partner on voter education. This nonpartisan, reliable voter education is so important. And each of you who are participating today, are doing playing such an important role in ensuring that our democracy is representative and ensuring that each of you, uses that important duty and responsibility, your vote, to build the kind of future that we all deserve. I am Emily Randall. I've had the great honor of serving as the senator for the 26th legislative district for the last 4 years. This is the community where I grew up, where my parents grew up, where I learned what it means to give back and to be of service. And while I didn't always think that I wanted to run for office, I was motivated to because I saw, from a really young age, what good government could do. When my sister was born with complex disabilities, it was Medicaid expansion that made a difference for my family. When I got a chance to be the first of my family to attend a 4-year institution, it was only because of financial aid. And so those experiences I bring with me to Olympia to fight for what is now the strongest financial aid program in the country. As chair of the Higher Education and Workforce Development Committee, I've worked to expand healthcare to our neighbors through postpartum Medicaid for new birth parents, through our Universal Healthcare Commission, through lowering costs for pharmaceuticals, and through ensuring that we're training the next generation of healthcare professionals. I know we have a lot more to do to make sure we can afford to follow our dreams, to afford to stay in our homes, afford to buy our first homes, but I'm eager to work alongside my neighbors like you to ensure that we achieve those dreams. And I look forward to the conversation today.
Thank you, Emily Randall. Jesse Young, please go ahead.
Jesse Young's not with us tonight.
I apologize. Spencer Hutchins, please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this great event and the opportunity for us as candidates to share our views and to have a conversation. This is, as Senator Randall said, a very important process. So thank you for that. My name is Spencer Hutchins. I'm running for the 26th Legislative District, State Representative Position 1, and it is truly an honor of a lifetime to be able to step forward and do this. I am running because of concerns that I have and that my family have about the direction that our state and community are going. As we speak, my children are downstairs getting dinner, and in my life, as I think about what we're doing, I look through the prism of the future that these children have in this community. I'm very concerned about the opportunities, the economic opportunities that they may experience, the opportunities to follow their dreams, achieve their goals, with the challenges that we're seeing in our state as cost of living is becoming untenable for so many people. I'm very concerned as we look at community safety and crime. I don't recognize the level of crime and drug use and all of the challenges that we're facing in this community. This is new for our community. I think it's new for our state to see the level of crime that we're experiencing. I am concerned about the direction the state legislature has taken this state. And it's because of that that I am stepping forward to run. I think it's very important that as we look at our two-party system, we have a majority party that is on the cusp of a supermajority in the state legislature. And I believe the best policies result when the two parties have to talk to each other. And so I'm looking forward to being part of that process, bringing my personal experience in the political world, in the business world, to serve this entire community. And I look forward to our conversation this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Spencer Hutchins. Addison Richards, please go ahead.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm Addison Richards, and I'm running for the open seat here in the 26th Legislative District, Position 1. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and all of the work that it takes to host this event and for giving us the opportunity to address everybody. And I want to thank everybody who is watching here tonight. The only people I see are the candidates on camera and the moderators, but I appreciate you all being here. I grew up in this district. This is my home. I went to Peninsula High School and grew up working for my dad's landscape business, hauling rocks and bark and digging irrigation trenches in the sun. But look, I've knocked on thousands of doors in this campaign, and the reason is pretty simple. I need to, and I want to hear from you. I want to hear what's on your mind, and I want to be accessible and accountable to you. And what has come up in these conversations time and again are concerns, first, about the economy and rising costs, and second, about public safety. I've sat at tables in courtrooms with survivors of domestic violence and people dealing with crimes like human trafficking who also cannot afford a lawyer and are trying to make ends meet. I've sat in rooms with judges and prosecutors and law enforcement talking about how we're going to deal with domestic violence. I've sat in offices up at night working on questions so that my client in crisis could tell her story to a room full of strangers so that she could protect her and her kids. And I've worked on expense and income sheets with clients in my work at Northwest Justice Project and seeing that the balance sheet is not working out. And I want to bring this experience to represent you, to represent my home. I've been representing clients in courtrooms, and I want to represent my home in the legislature to help address these issues and so many more, and look forward to your questions. Another big one I want to talk about tonight is education. I get to coach and watch kids run around and want them to have a successful future. Thank you.
Thank you, Addison Richards. Michelle Caldier, please go ahead.
Thank you for hosting this tonight, and thank you for everyone who's here. I am State Representative Michelle Caldier. I'm serving my 8th year here in Olympia, and I'm looking forward to serving another term. Prior to serving in the legislature, I was a nursing home dentist. I had a practice that was devoted to caring for the elderly, to caring for homebound individuals, and people who were in nursing homes. I came down to Olympia because of some dental bills that affected my patients. And I learned that one person could make a difference as a citizen, which inspired me to run for office. So while I've been in office, I have worked a lot of policy on foster care issues, healthcare policy, housing, and also working with sexual assault victims. I've had a
1 minute.
I work very well across the aisle. I have great working relationships with some of my Democratic colleagues. And because of that, even though I am in a minority, I've had several wins working across the aisle, and I would like to continue working and serving my community. The other thing too is I've always had an open door policy in terms of listening to
30
everyone,
seconds.
regardless of where they stand on the political spectrum. And I look forward to any questions that people have today. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle Caldier. Matt Macklin, please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I apologize. I don't have my camera on just yet, but I'll be with you shortly. I'm Matt Macklin. I am running for the 26th District, Legislative District, Position 2. That is a position currently held by Ms. Caldier, who you just heard from. I am an attorney, a nursing home administrator, and first and foremost, I'm a dad and a husband. That's kind of why I'm running behind schedule a little bit today. The reason why I'm running is because I spent the last 3 and 4 years of my career working in healthcare as an attorney and as a nursing home administrator on the front lines, and seeing kind of how our healthcare system has been so fractured and let us down over the years. I think that the current representation in our legislature doesn't hold the values or have the efficacy that we're looking for. And as a result, I think that it's time that we have the right people with the right skills in place that can bring the right people around the table to get the bills done correctly the first time around. Whether we're talking about Medicaid reimbursement and healthcare non-monopolies, or we're talking about education policy and taxation and growth management. So I'm really looking forward to the conversation tonight. It's always fun to kick it back and forth. I think the conversation is always different when we have the constituents in the room, and Michelle is always fun to take a swipe at and have good conversations and feedback from her experience. She has a wealth of knowledge from being in the legislature the last 8 years. However, I do think it's time for a change there, and that's why I'm running.
Thank you, Matt Macklin. Thank you all.
Now we come to the questions. Each candidate gets up to 90 seconds to answer each question. For some questions, we may indicate that you only have 60 seconds. Again, live audience questions can be texted to 253-224-5691. That's 253-224-5691. The candidate order will rotate with each question, so that for question number 1, we'll start with Spencer Hutchins. The first question is, Washington state tax structure is the most regressive in the US, meaning that Washington families with low incomes pay the highest percentage of their income in state and local taxes, while those with high incomes pay the lowest amount of taxes. What measures would you support to make the Washington state tax structure more equitable and less regressive? Spencer Hutchins, please.
I appreciate the question. Washington state voters have had an opportunity to weigh in on our tax structure in Washington many, many times. And what we consistently hear from Washington voters, and we've heard it most recently with some advisory votes, is the voters of the state of Washington feel overtaxed. And we have seen that with votes on most recently the capital gains income tax. The Washington state sales tax is the result of a state constitutional provision that says there is no state income tax. I believe that if the voters of the state of Washington would like to see a state income tax, that would be something that could be pursued in terms of constitutional amendment. As it is with our tax structure now, I would like to see a more equitable distribution of the sales tax in terms of how allowing for people of lower means or lower incomes to be able to have some relief from that income from the sales tax. I think the other thing we have to look at is our B&O tax structure as well. A lot of revenues come into the state through taxes on our businesses, and our businesses, our small businesses, are the engine of this economy. And when we tax our small businesses, we are limiting their ability to employ and ensure that people in this community are able to provide for themselves. So I would like to see some reforms to our B&O tax structure as well to give some relief to our employers and our small businesses.
Thank you. Addison Richards, please.
Well, I recognize the problem, and I've worked with clients and worked with people who experience the effect of having the most unaccountable and unfair tax structure in the state in my legal work. And look, I support reforms to our B&O tax structure as well. I think that small businesses like my dad's end up getting taxed too much under a B&O tax structure that isn't fair to our local small businesses. We did provide some relief to small businesses this last legislative session, but we need to do a lot more. And then even look at recategorizing small businesses. There's reforms to our property tax structure and how much local homeowners are getting charged. Gas taxes, it impacts people who like myself and everyone in our district drive everywhere because we have to, and so we've got to look at some serious reforms to these tax structures. I support lowering taxes again, like I said, for homeowners and for small businesses, and want to help address our budget in a really fiscally responsible way as your representative. I think there are things like the increases we're seeing in taxes from marijuana sales, for example, that could be pegged to help our substance abuse and mental health crises. And so I want to get to work on a lot of these solutions and provide some relief for folks.
Thank you. Michelle Caldier, please.
Quite frankly, we need an entire overhaul of our tax structure to make it more fair for everyone in our state. Unfortunately, I don't know if there is a current will of the legislature as we sit to do that. So I am more than happy to do so and be at the table to do a complete overhaul of our tax structure. Until then, while I've been in office for the last 8 years, there have been tax after tax after tax that have been come forward.
1 minute.
Almost all of those are regressive taxes. And I have consistently voted against those regressive taxes that would hit our poorest the most. So I have a long-standing track record of fighting regressive taxes, and I will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Macklin, please.
Yeah, I think that here in the 26th, for the most part, we don't like the current situation. I think that's pretty straightforward. That's fair. I think that the way we fix it is what's in dispute. My assessment of capital gains, of B&O, of any potential income tax, gas tax, is that we're taxing the wrong people. The equity that surrounds taxation of things like gas, or the way that we tax our small businesses currently, is not equitable. It's not sustainable, and it's really squeezing the middle. It's the true voters. It's the true citizens of this state. We need to develop a capital gains that is equitable and a corporate tax that is fair, so that large corporations pay their fair share. We have to draw the line where large corporations continue to take advantage of our one-of-a-kind industry and our one-of-a-kind technical infrastructure without paying their fair share. Multiple billions, some of the richest and most valuable companies in the world depend on Washington, and Washington doesn't have a fair seat at the table when it comes to determining how they pay into that benefit. Thank you.
Thank you. Emily Randall, please.
Thank you. I think, we have been working these last 4 years to try and chip away at this problem. It's right. Our tax structure is the most upside down. It's the most regressive. It means that, lowest income Washingtonians are paying the highest effective tax rate in our state. And that is not the kind of equitable future that we want to keep building. So, some of what I'm proud of is funding the working families tax credit in these last few years. Spencer mentioned wanting to make sure that we were putting money back in the pockets of the lowest income Washingtonians who are paying such a high percentage of sales tax. And that's what we did with the working families tax credit. We need to continue building and expanding to put money back in the pockets. But I also agree that, we can chip away bit by bit at fixing this inequitable tax structure, or we can look at wholesale reconfiguration. And I'm eager to see, what kind of proposals come before us this next session, but we do need to shift the burden off of low-income families, working class families, and ensure that big business and the wealthiest Washingtonians are paying their fair share to help build the state and the future that we deserve. And at the same time, we know that not all of our needs are met. So we have to balance the revenue impact on people and what it means for individual budgets, but I know that we can do this work together.
Thank you.
Next question. If elected, what are your budget priorities and how would you pay for them? Addison Richards, please go ahead.
Well, I'll start with education. It's the paramount duty of the state to fully fund education, and we should start there. I believe that universal preschool is something that is absolutely necessary to make sure that every student in Washington has the opportunity to get to the starting line at the same time. And so I want to work on solutions to address that. We need to make sure that we're building out programs at the high school level, including our CTE programs. We have really exciting things happening in the school districts here, whether it's South Kitsap, Peninsula, Bremerton, to build up pathways to trades. But we need to go further and give kids more options, and that means restoring a lot of funding for our public schools. There's litigation out of Southwest Washington, which is basically McCleary 2.0. It's basically saying the state is treating lower income districts way differently and requiring a lot more of local property owners and homeowners in those lower income districts than say the Mercer Islands and Bellevues of the world. And there's a lot of burden being placed on districts like ours, on South Kitsap, on Peninsula and Bremerton to carry the load. And so that's where we go into reforms of the property tax structure. And I believe there's a lot of work that we can do there in order to better fund our schools.
Thank you, Addison Richards. Michelle Caldier, please go ahead.
There's two areas that we have woefully underfunded the entire 8 years that I've been there that I have consistently advocated for. One of those is mental health, and the other one is for individuals with developmental disabilities. Those are the two segments of the population that no matter what, we should be taking care of, and we have not been taking care of them. We need to make sure that they have adequate housing for individuals who have severe
1 minute.
mental illness that are not able to find housing otherwise, and to make sure that they have support systems as well as individuals with developmental disabilities. One of the other things that I'm also working on is ensuring that our colleges are prioritizing healthcare slots, because we have such a huge workforce issue in healthcare, and each one of those slots are so expensive to produce a nurse
30
compared to someone who has a political science degree. So what our colleges have done over the years is they've decreased the number of programs or just not increased them at all. And as a result, we are not keeping up with the pace of the demand of what we need in our state for healthcare providers. So those are a couple of my bigger top budget issues for this upcoming session.
Thank you, Michelle Caldier. Matt Macklin, please go ahead.
Thank you. There's so many priorities. It's hard to get them all squeezed in 2 minutes, so I'll jump right in. Addison makes a good point about education, but I'll focus on healthcare. I have a plan ready to introduce on day one that would address and provide a paradigm for the state that would provide healthcare, mental health, implementation, and accountability at the county level, but provided by the state. We already have a lot of counties that have partaken and elected to increase their sales tax to the 0.1%, and that will provide as a base for this funding. Additionally, I would propose the bill that would provide an additional matching or dollar match on top of that. That would both incentivize other counties to take part of, but also provide the real funding needed. From a healthcare background and studying this across the country, we have a lot of work that we can be doing in the form of mobile crisis units, in the form of partnering with law enforcement, if not producing departments within law enforcement that focus on crisis management. But we have to get our arms around both the outcomes that we see in the community, whether it be homelessness, addiction, or otherwise, but get upstream and also address that before it happens. So this investment also partners with community to get outpatient clinic and outpatient care and providers partnered with the community to prevent crisis situations that are overwhelming our first responders currently.
Thank you, Matt Macklin. Emily Randall, please go ahead.
Thank you. It's always hard to, pick our top 1, 2, or 3 priorities. But the 3 things that are really pressing on my mind the most right now are mental health and crisis support, our affordability, particularly around housing, and defending our abortion rights and ensuring that Washingtonians and anyone who needs to seek services in Washington continue to have the freedom to choose abortion. So on the mental health side, I have been in conversation with a lot of first responders and colleagues, and we're eager to roll out proposals that will create strong crisis triage infrastructure in every county in the state, which is something we do not have right now. Arizona has a really cool model that ensures at least 23 hours of care so that our first responders, our police officers, our firefighters can drop folks off for treatment instead of sending them to the jail or the ER or a shelter where they just continue bouncing in and out. I'm also interested in dealing with our housing crisis. I hear every day from neighbors who are facing $300, $400, $500 a month rent increases, and we need to stop that. We need more supply. We need to look at control mechanisms. And on abortion rights, there will be funding needs to make sure that our independent clinics can continue providing services, since communities like ours only have Catholic healthcare options, but there's also so much more to do.
Thank you, Emily Randall.
Spencer Hutchins, please.
Much of what I would say has been said, so I'm going to run through those priorities pretty quickly. First, education is the paramount responsibility of the legislature to fund and provide. Second, the needs of our mental health treatment and disabilities providers, that is an absolute top priority. Third, we need to fund our law enforcement and our drug treatment facilities at a much higher level and as a higher priority of government. And fourth, our transportation infrastructure is a huge need that needs to be managed well, funded well, and organized around making sure our economy and our commercial opportunities are operating at the highest level to provide for meaningful employment and meaningful livelihoods for the people of Washington. I want to talk about the second part of the question, which is how do we pay for it? Because it's really important for us to understand. We had a $15 billion revenue surplus last year. That is about $2,000 more money per Washingtonian than was originally budgeted. We do not have a revenue problem in Washington. We are bringing in, as we talked about earlier, plenty of tax dollars. What we have to do is make sure those tax dollars are being prioritized and spent in a disciplined and effective manner. And that is what I am 100% committed to as a state representative.
Thank you, Spencer Hutchins.
Next question, we'll start with Michelle Caldier. Current Washington state law promotes access to affordable, high-quality sexual and reproductive health care, including abortion and contraception, without unnecessary burdens or restrictions on patients or providers. What is your position on these protections, and would you vote to change them or not? Michelle Caldier.
We have had voters have overwhelmingly stated time and time again that they want some form of abortive rights in Washington state. That is not going to change in our state. The bills that have come forward have more to do in the past with how the funding is, as well as what types of providers that we've had to perform abortive services. One of the things that I have always believed is that we need to have people who are educated to take care of our young ladies and making sure that they get the adequate health care that they deserve. Right now, I worked with the Office of Public Research, and they did not have much in terms of the current physician's assistants and nurse practitioners do not have much by way of training to perform these services. So I would prefer to make sure that we have providers who have adequate training to perform those abortive services. I'm also, the only expansion that I would see in our state would be late-term abortion, and I would have to vote in opposition of late-term abortion. So,
Thank you. Matt Macklin, please.
Yes, I am supportive of a women's right to self-determination, their right to choice, their right to choose what's right for them and their families, and that includes the spectrum. I think that a lot of the explanations that have been presented by other persons are not founded in facts. I think that when we talk about the training or the level of competency for providers to perform these services, they're very straightforward in the sense of medical, in the medical world. I think that anything that prohibits a woman's right to choose or have the discussion with their physician about what services are appropriate in their condition or what they're going through is completely beyond the hands of the legislator. So I would vote absolutely, adamantly, and vehemently against anything that would infringe on that right.
Thank you. Emily Randall, please.
Thank you. Well, I think I've been pretty outspoken about my support for every Washingtonian to have the freedom to choose when and how to plan our families. I don't believe that politicians belong in in the doctor's office, in a medical clinic. I believe that we need to continue to protect what the voters have over and over said at the ballot box that they support, that they would like to protect. What I think we need to see, as I mentioned briefly before, is investments in our clinics so that they can continue seeing the increasing number of patients that we're facing from out of state, from Idaho, from Texas. Pregnant people all across the country are having to come to Washington to access services because they no longer exist in their home states. We need to make sure that we're protecting privacy, patient privacy beyond HIPAA. It's looking at, Meta released communications between a parent and their child while the daughter was seeking abortion services. That we need to make sure that individual data is kept private in Washington. We also need to protect providers who may be at risk of increasing malpractice insurance or their license being dinged in other states if they're dual licensed in Washington and Idaho. That's some of the work that we have ahead of us that I'm excited to continue supporting.
Thank you. Spencer Hutchins, please.
This is an issue that I think we have to start right from the beginning by coming out with a great deal of compassion and sensitivity. Abortion is extremely personal and very serious. And I personally know people who have made that choice. I think we all know people who we may not even be aware have made that choice in their life. And I think that it's important to come at this with a lot of compassion and empathy. And that said, what the Supreme Court did in Dobbs does not change the underlying structure of Washington state's abortion rights. And the voters of the state of Washington a long time ago made clear that abortion is something that they see as lawful and they have protected under the laws of the state of Washington. Given that the voters have spoken through the initiative process, I believe that as a legislator, I have to exhibit humility and respect for the will of the voters and treat this issue as settled law. And if it's going to change, I believe the proper place for it to be changed is at the ballot box by the voters of the state of Washington, given that the underlying law that would be changed was also passed by the voters at the ballot box. It is so important that we provide for care for people who are in serious need and have faced difficult challenges. And I agree with what Michelle said and believe that we need to make sure that that care is provided. As someone who's personally pro-life, I come at this issue with a lot of humility and compassion, and I believe that's what the legislature should do.
Thank you. Addison Richards, please.
I support access to reproductive health care and to reproductive freedom. I do not believe that politicians should be involved in making decisions between a woman and her doctor. And I will work to support these rights in the legislature. We thought that this was settled law until the Supreme Court had a majority to reverse 50 years of precedent. And if you are not hearing that someone supports access to reproductive freedom and supports the constitutional right to liberty for every single person under the Constitution, if you're not hearing support personally for access to reproductive health care, then there should be concern. We are seeing these rights disappear across the state, or across the country. And we need to preserve majorities that are going to protect these rights for every single Washingtonian.
Thank you.
Next question. What is your position on universal health care for all of Washington state? Michelle Caldier, please go ahead.
Oh, I didn't realize I get to do it twice at first. So sorry about that. I
Right.
wasn't ready.
You should
I
start with
apologize.
Matt.
That was
Sorry,
my
sorry about
mistake. Lydia, who's next in rotation? I apologize.
Matt Macklin.
Matt Macklin. I apologize to all candidates. Matt Macklin, please go ahead.
No, universal health care. I believe that health care is a human right, not just a privilege. In a country of our stature, it's absolutely possible for us to provide a level of universal health care for every person that lives here. I think that Washington, as it set the trail for so many other initiatives, is certainly keen and able to do that as well. I think that the right solution is going to be a combination of government payer and private payer as well. From a healthcare background, this is definitely something that I have been studying and quite aware of for decades at this point. And I think that it's time that we put our nose to the grindstone and understand how we can provide these essential care services to our Washingtonians without regard to some of the banter that we've heard over the years, some of the myths really. Overall, we can seek to reduce our cost and our wait times and these other myths that you've heard out there if we invest heavily in preventative care and invest heavily in adolescent care. I think that our cost is exacerbated when we talk about the prolonged application of services, whether we talk about the cost of just before death and dying. All those things are components that prohibit and make it cost ineffective to continue down the path that we currently are. So universal healthcare is a right, not just a benefit. And I think we certainly have the capacity to make that happen in a comprehensive way through private and public payers.
Thank you, Matt Macklin. Emily Randall.
Thank you. So, I said in my opening statement a little bit about my sister and my early experience with healthcare. That's one of the reasons I ran for office in the first place, because I knew that Washington State had expanded Medicaid in 1993, and it made a difference for my family and many other families that I had spoken to, and I knew we could continue to lead. That's why I worked so hard to establish Washington State's Universal Healthcare Commission. It's been called some of the strongest universal healthcare policy to be passed in any state in the last decade. And our commission is empowered to make decisions about how we use Medicaid dollars more creatively, how we apply for waivers without having to keep coming back to the legislature to pass another bill to say, let's use federal dollars a little differently. We know that we have the capacity to cover more people sooner. And I'm excited at the prospect of ensuring that no one has to rely only on the emergency room for healthcare services. We know that preventative services make such a difference, both in costs for the whole system, but also for individuals' long-term health. I also think, we have shortage of providers in our community and across the state. And so wearing my higher education chair hat, I'm eager to help train the next generation of medical providers so that we can have shorter wait times in communities like Kitsap and Pierce County so that more people can get seen when they need it.
Thank you, Emily Randall. Addison Richards, please go ahead.
All right, Spencer is next.
I am so sorry, candidate. Spencer Hutchins, please go ahead.
That's all right. Thank you very much. Desiring to expand healthcare coverage through a state universal program sounds good. It sounds like a good idea to expand coverage and to expand access. The problem is where the state gets involved, costs do not drop, costs go up. Access does not expand, access shrinks. I was just speaking with some hospital personnel in our area the other day who are lamenting the process that they have to go through at the state to improve their equipment, provide more services, open another clinic, bring on more people. The state's management of our healthcare has been, in my view, something of a disaster. And so the notion that by expanding it and opening up to a state universal healthcare system, to me, doesn't make sense as a solution. Right now, we have a Medicaid reimbursement problem that is hitting our healthcare community and people who are on Medicaid like a Mack truck. We are not getting the kind of treatments that people need who are on these programs. The healthcare providers who are working through Medicaid are not getting the reimbursements that they need to continue providing that type of care. And so I do not believe that expanding what is not working now to make it a universal system is going to in any way solve a problem. We need to really get serious about the way the state is regulating healthcare rather than looking at a universal healthcare system paid for by the state of Washington.
Thank you, Spencer Hutchins. Addison Richards, please go ahead.
So I want every single person in our state to have access to quality and affordable health care. Healthcare is a three-legged stool. It's quality, it's affordability, and it's access. And right now, I feel like most people feel they aren't getting any of those. Usually, countries around the world get two, and we've got a lot of work to do on this. And we do, though, need to recognize as well that it's not on our healthcare workers, our nurses, our doctors, and our frontline workers who are working their tails off and have been for the past few years, especially through the pandemic. And I have a great deal of gratitude for everything that they've done for us. But look, what I see in our state is a access issue and a supply issue. I see us having a problem with too many regional monopolies. And so where there isn't competition, you're going to see a huge increase in prices and in lack of access. Support increasing our reimbursement rates. So clients that I served at Northwest Justice, for example, can have more access to providers. And look, there's just a lot of work that we have to do here in a system that is private healthcare based, and we have to navigate through that system. And I do support market-based solutions to increase the supply of healthcare in our state. And I've felt the unaffordability issue, though, personally as well. With my prescription drug costs, there was a small change in my insurance a couple of years ago, and my prescription shot up 1,000%. And we've got to do something about it. And I'm serious on getting to work.
Thank you, Addison Richards. Michelle Caldier, please go ahead.
So if the question is, do I think that everyone should have access to healthcare? The answer is yes. But the reality of it is that the proposals that have been put forward involve more, basically having the government take over our entire healthcare system. And if you ask anyone who is on Medicaid and say, hey, is this working for you? Is Medicaid has expanded and more people are covered?
1 minute.
Ask them, say, can you find a provider? Do you have access to healthcare? You don't have to pay anything out of pocket. And the answer is no, because when we expanded Medicaid, we never increased the amount that we're paying for providers. We've never increased the number of providers to care for those people. And it's a cost shift. Every single time a provider sees a Medicaid person, they lose money for each and every single person. So somebody's got to pay for that somewhere. And I would be happy to sit at the table to look at how what the proposals are and what is fair, and whether or not people would actually truly get access, because all of the universal healthcare proposals I've seen so far fail. So, but I'm happy to be at the table for that.
Thank you, Michelle Caldier.
Next question. Noting that over 15% of your legislative district's population are vets, what is your plan to address substance abuse and mental health issues? We'll start with Emily Randall.
Thank you. This, is so important. And I've had the chance to talk to veteran suicide prevention advocates in our community and work with the Washington State Department of Veteran Affairs. And for a while, I shared a hallway where my district office was with a mental health provider who worked almost predominantly with veterans. Some of the barriers that we see are stigma, folks who have, TRICARE or VA coverage, but don't feel comfortable accessing mental health care in, military affiliated units because of stigma. We also see a huge number of, veterans who are disconnected from services, who are disconnected from community, who are struggling with, PTSD and isolation. And I think, to my point earlier about building out our crisis triage support, that's so important because, we'll be treating civilians, but also the huge number of veterans who want to access care in community, but we also need to continue training providers. We just don't have enough mental health providers in Washington state, and certainly not on the peninsula, to meet the needs of our community. So I'm committed to continue investing in education and training, and looking at mid-level licensure, and looking at other options so that we can meet our neighbors' needs.
Thank you. Spencer Hutchins, please.
Thank you for raising the very important issue of our veterans in this community. I just am so grateful for the culture of service that is infused throughout this community with our very strong veteran community here. We are blessed to have people in this community who have made it that part of their life's mission to serve this country in uniform, and we're grateful for them. I personally have family members who have come home with service-connected disability, with service-connected mental illness. And this is something, to Emily's point, that is so crucial. We have to recognize how deeply mental illness and mental crisis can creep into every corner of our community and take the stigma away. Just a few weeks ago, several of us were at a prayer breakfast for a local nonprofit that deals with veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder and suicide prevention. It's so important. We must, as a state, get very serious about how we fund and how we structure our mental health treatment. We are doing a terrible job here in the 21st century handling an issue that should be, it's a complex issue for the individual patient. It should not be complex for us to find a way to fully fund our mental health needs, provide the facilities, and get out of the way of providers to come into that business, to come into that practice and help people who are in need. So we have to, as we said before in the funding conversation, to me, it is a top priority, top tier funding priority for the state, and it has to be put into our budgets and our policies.
Thank you. Addison Richards, please.
So I also have family members who served. My granddad served in World War II and the Korean War in the Navy, and my grandma, he met in the Navy, and she served in the Korean War. And my granddad's aircraft carrier, the Ranger, got retired up here in the Bremerton shipyard. And so this is a personal issue for me as well. I'm thinking about them, and I'm just so grateful for all of our service members as well. And look, I've worked with service members, with veterans, and including veterans with disabilities. And I know that a lot of the issues we're seeing with veteran homelessness, for example, stems from discharge status or coming out of service with anything but an honorable discharge. And so I want to get to work on where the legal world in our state is failing to make sure that they've got housing and access to healthcare and other services. And I also want to help get to work on, we mentioned mental health and substance abuse treatment. And holistically, we have to do a lot better in our state than treating these things with jail cells, ERs, and tents on the street. We were talking about healthcare. When you're treating these crises with ERs, that's increasing healthcare costs for everybody. And so I mentioned earlier wanting to peg this increases in sales taxes that we're seeing to funding specifically substance abuse and mental health crises, and I'll work on that going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Michelle Caldier, please.
Thank you for this question. I also have a lot of family who've served and have had a lot of problems after their service. So I think that there's the cultural component to not wanting to seek help. That is definitely an issue. The other issue, however, is that especially after the pandemic, after many healthcare providers left the industry, and after we had more and more people who had mental illness, and the demand grew even greater just overall in our population. What we found is that a lot of the providers who were left, they chose to either not take TRICARE because there's a lot more paperwork involved, or and also not taking Medicaid. And one of the things that we need to do, and that is going back to my proposal to getting more healthcare providers overall for our state is we need to increase the number of providers and make it so that people have true access to
15 seconds.
substance abuse help and also to help for mental illness. So thank you.
Thank you. Matt Macklin, please. You're on mute.
His mute button isn't on, but we're not hearing him.
Can you hear me now?
Go ahead.
Not sure where that happened. I'm excited about this question. My dad was an Army vet, quartermaster. I have 3 brothers that were Marines. My uncle was in the Army. My grandpa was in World War II. My dad saw action in Korea, Vietnam, my brothers. So I understand what they've gone through as much as I can. We all know that some of the effects of mental health, PTSD, physical, obviously, wounds and ailments disproportionately affect our veterans. I'm really excited and proud that Washington State has, unlike a lot of other states, an actual veterans department or agency of its own. I think that that's the first step in the right direction. And I think that correcting a lot of mental health and issues that we see in our communities is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. I think that a lot of reentry programs could be still spearheaded by our agencies here in Washington, especially since we have the hubs that we do, the bases. But I am certainly aware and supportive of the need to engage with veterans on a different level because of their experience, whether that be because of the disproportionate populations in skilled nursing. A family member of mine who's also a veteran actually ran our veterans home right here in Port Orchard. So I am very close to this issue. I'm constantly trying to figure out ways to contribute and enhance that experience. And it's a place that's close to my heart.
Thank you.
Next question. What state legislation do you propose or support to address climate change and climate-induced disasters? Spencer Hutchins, please go ahead.
Well, the legislature has seen no shortage of legislation aimed at environmental protection, global climate change, carbon emissions. I think that it is very important as we talk about this issue to understand the effects of the regulations that are being put in place, not only for the benefit of our climate, but also for our livelihoods, our economy, and the effect on the culture of our state. We have a state legislature that has passed things like cap and trade, low carbon fuel standards, all oriented around ensuring that we are protecting the environment, which is, I think, a very important aim. However, the positive benefits of those regulations are infinitesimally small to the global climate compared to the potential economic degradation, the loss of livelihood, the cost of living explosion on top of what is already a very difficult inflationary economy that we're in right now. So I believe that our environment must be protected. We love this place where we live. We live in one of the most beautiful places on the planet. We have to do things to protect our salmon population. We have to do things to protect our orca population, make sure our water is clean, make sure our forests are healthy, and avoid things like we have seen with all of the forest fires. But we have to do it in a responsible way. And I have seen the legislature be totally imbalanced in the way it weighs out protecting the environment versus protecting the livelihoods of hardworking Washingtonians who depend on our economy for their survival.
Thank you, Spencer Hutchins. Addison Richards, please go ahead.
When I think about the issue of climate change, I think about not only growing up swimming in Puget Sound and the seafood restaurant I worked at while I was in law school, but I think about conversations I've had with fire chiefs who say that what keeps them up at night is the possibility of catastrophic fire in our community. And then it's not if, but when. You know, and right now it's October and we haven't seen any rain yet. I'm watching the cedar trees grow more brown and smoke filling up air so that the kids I coach cross country can't run outside. At least that was the case a couple of days last week. So this is an issue I take very seriously. And I plan to approach it in a market-based way. I want to help create jobs in an energy program here in Washington State to get solar panels up on roofs and to help us transition more smoothly into using clean energy technology, and to do so in a way that's going to not only create energy independence, but also lower energy costs. If we make it extremely affordable to install panels and transition into other forms of energy, use tides and use geothermal and you name it, like let's unleash the private sector on this issue as well, and really create a lot of incentives and tax structures and market-based solutions to create innovation around creating these technologies so that we can power our homes and be really responsible. We're very close in Washington State to transitioning off of fossil fuels, and we can make that transition happen, I think, faster with the Jobs and Energy Program targeted at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Addison Richards. Michelle Caldier, please go ahead.
Prior to me joining the legislature, one of the problems that we had was that our forests were not adequately maintained and thinned. So that has been a huge focus, is making sure that our current lands commissioner, who I believe is doing a much better job than her predecessor, has got the tools that she needs to make sure that that she's doing forest management. Of course, she was backlogged for many, many years. And it will take time to fix that, but also making sure that she has the tools for emergency response services, because historically that has also not been done. One of my focuses I'm going to be working on for this upcoming session, however, is fixing all of the sewage spills that have come into our beautiful Puget Sound. We have had King County especially, who has had major infrastructure problems and dumps raw sewage into our beautiful Puget Sound. And when the Department of Ecology goes and slaps them on the wrist and gives them a fine, the fine equates to about $1 per 1,000 gallons of sewage into our Puget Sound. And there is very little motivation for them to fix that. That is a huge problem. It's really frustrating that it has not been a big issue. And I know Senator Randall has heard me on many floor speeches this last couple of years talk about that. So I'm looking forward to partnering with my Democratic colleagues to work on that issue.
Thank you, Michelle Caldier. Matt Macklin, please go ahead.
This may be something that we all kind of see the same approach to. I think that we all have a certain affinity for our home and its beauty and protecting that. I think with this particular issue in climate and green energy, the key is having a plan. This is a uniquely long-term goal-focused thing. There's a lot of moving parts and there's lots of things that feed into the outcome. We need to make sure that we are acknowledging and bringing the right people around the table to make sure that we're having a systematic and equitable solution and plan to this long-term, however we implement that. Whether we're talking about protecting salmon runs, or we're talking about forest fires, or the sound that's very important to our economy and our culture. I think that the key moving forward is to talk about it and see where all of the interests and the collective goals are. When we talk about moving from our current situation to cleaner energy, the key is to not leave all of our people behind. We certainly have mouths to feed, and we have individuals who have livelihoods that would be lost with the transition. So we need to do that in a systemic and a tempered way that capitalize on innovation. One of the terrible things we could do is throw up a bunch of current technology panels with no one to maintain them, and then they're obsolete in 10 years. So knowing the measured cost, having a long-term plan is the key to any approach to a sustainable climate addressing plan that includes change to green energy.
Thank you, Matt Macklin. Emily Randall, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think balancing the impact on individual neighbors, on hardworking families, and ensuring that our long term, our community is healthy, that, you know, our grandchildren, as grandchildren have a place to raise their families, is what we call planning for a just transition. You know, we need to ensure that as we continue greening our energy, you know, Washington already does have some of the cleanest energy in the country, but we know we have more to do. We need to have grid resiliency. We need to plan for green jobs. We need to continue innovating, and we need to make sure that as we transition, individuals can afford it, and we don't continue seeing the problem that we have with our already upside down tax code, in which the hardest working, lowest income Washingtonians are carrying so much of the burden. So I'm excited at some of the progress that we made at Cap and Invest, at ensuring that there's a marketplace for you know, lowering our carbon emissions, but also thinking about how do we invest in innovation through our community and technical colleges and our university system. We already have some cool grant programs in which students are using ocean plastics to build rocket ship parts. And I think we can continue to see that kind of innovation that not only gets us closer to a greener future, but also ensures that Washington students, Washington scientists are at the forefront of creating those jobs here in Washington that will help our entire country and our world.
Thank you, Emily Randall.
Next question is an audience question, and timekeeper, it will be 60 seconds. So the 60-second question will start with Addison Richards. Are you willing to vote against your caucus to implement the goals and priorities that you are expressing tonight? Addison Richards.
Yes, and that is because I first and foremost will be representing you, the people of the 26th district. And we need effective representation in Olympia. You know, we've been represented, we'll say on a partisan note, by Republicans for the past decade, and our bridges are falling apart. If you look at Fox Island, and our schools are falling behind the Mercer Islands of the world, and we need to do a lot better in terms of our advocacy in Olympia. And I do plan to advocate for this community in the majority caucus, but whenever and however I can effectively represent you, I am willing to disagree with my caucus. And I think the ideas I've expressed tonight kind of show that that will be the case. And look, I've met a lot of people at the doors, and I keep hearing a lot of concerns about public safety and rising costs. And I want to address that in a holistic way with the experience that I have. Derek Kilmer loves to say neither party has a monopoly on good ideas, and I agree with him.
Thank you. Michelle Caldier, please.
Oh, absolutely. I have a proven track record of bucking my caucus and making sure that I am voting the way that I believe the people of the 26th district want me to vote. Couple examples of that. Number one would be the transparency bill that we had several years ago. That was very high pressured. Our caucus leaders got us together, told us this is how you're going to vote. And I said, nope, I'm not going to vote that way, because I believe that whatever our school board is subjected to for transparency is what I should be subjected to as a legislator. Another example is the conversion therapy bill, where we had people who would take someone who was identified as gay and put rocks in their shoes. And I thought that was child abuse. And I said, I think that's how the rest of the district would vote. And I was threatened that I would have people run against me. And sure enough, that happened. So there's a price to pay for sticking up for the people, and I will continue to fight for the people.
Thank you. Matt Macklin, please.
Hey, anyone that knows me or has worked with me is not asking the question of if I would, but when it will happen. I think that my key reason for running for this district is because I feel like we deserve representation that's more than just a vote, but advocacy for our district. And that means that a lot of times just the nature of where we live and our culture and how we are here is different than a lot of Washington and a lot of legislature. So it is not an ounce of concern for me that I would vote against the party. The extra consideration that I could provide, though, is that As a negotiator, is what I do for a living, is I convince people that the way that I think is best is the best way. That is what I will bring to the table, so that maybe it's not so much as voting against the party or voting against the majority, but voting in a way that supports our district and bringing people along with us.
Thank you. Emily Randall, please.
Thank you. Yes. So I have a track record in Olympia of sometimes pushing back against, our party's state leader, the governor. I've introduced legislation to control the governor's emergency powers, to bring us in line with other states, even democratically controlled states. I've worked to ensure that we're not only focusing on Seattle, King County, and I-5 area policies by introducing, tax policy that would incentivize manufacturing facility and warehouse construction in our county. The governor vetoed some important parts of that legislation, but I'm eager to come back and override that veto with the votes that we need to do it. I'm focused on our community, on ensuring that our community and all of Washington, but especially the 26th district, has the tools that we need to build the lives that we dream of. And whether that means standing on one side of the aisle, on the other side of the aisle, or in the middle of the aisle, I'm ready to work with whoever I need to make that happen.
Thank you. Spencer Hutchins, please.
Well, let's round it out by having me say absolutely. I will be very glad to vote against the position of my party when it serves the interest of my community. And you have in me a candidate for this office who has a track record of doing so. Having been a city council member, I had the opportunity to take some votes that ran counter to some of my friends on the council. In fact, one of the very last votes I took on the city council was a lone no vote against a budget that I believed was irresponsible and did some things that were absolutely not in the interest of the community. You have to be willing to buck the trend or buck the party in order to do what is right. I'm very proud to have endorsements by people across the political spectrum. An endorsement by the Tacoma News Tribune, not exactly known for supporting Republican candidates, but sees in me someone who will work in a bipartisan fashion and be willing to vote for my district, not for the interests of my party. That's what I bring to the table: the experience, the heart, the passion for that, and I look forward to implementing it as a state legislator.
Thank you.
Next question. Timekeeper, this next question will be 60 seconds. Do you think police reforms are necessary? And if so, what legislation would you propose or support? Michelle Caldier, please go ahead.
Yes, they are definitely necessary. I voted in opposition to the police reform bills. Unfortunately, I do not believe our law enforcement was heard during this whole process. And I think one of them is the pursuit bill. That's something that definitely needs to change. We also need to make sure that we can recruit and retain law enforcement, and making sure that we change the culture of Washington State.
30 seconds.
Right now, police are afraid to go to work and be killed. And we need to change that. We need to make sure that we're valuing our law enforcement and thanking them for the job that they're doing. So absolutely.
Thank you, Michelle Caldier. Matt Macklin, please go ahead.
I certainly think that police reform is necessary, and it certainly has to be a balanced approach. And the focus here has to be on balanced. As a person of color, I certainly feel for a person who is a law enforcement officer that has fear for their life when they go to work, and they want to be able to do their job well. And I feel like we need to provide them with the resources they need, whether that be in mental health services and the right to pursue when it's necessary. As an attorney, I think that we really made some errors in semantics with how we define reasonable suspicion versus probable cause in some of our bills. But I also have a real concern about people of color who have fear of walking down the street, of losing their lives, or sleeping in their bed. So I don't think we can downplay that reality as well. I think that we missed the mark with these last round of bills, but I don't think they're beyond repair. So introducing legislation to reform police accountability is first key, but I don't think that's a one size fits all either. I think that the community stakeholders need to have a certain amount of buy-in and input to what that looks like, because the problems of Tacoma-Pierce or of King and of Kitsap are all different.
Thank you, Matt Macklin. Emily Randall, please go ahead.
Thank you. So over the past couple of years, we've seen, a lot of calls from community, particularly communities of color all across the country, but in locally here at home in our cities and communities, to make sure that we have policies that establish and maintain trust between law enforcement, our community guardians, and the individuals that they're serving and protecting. We led the country in some of our police reform legislation. And I think what often happens when you're out in front is that, maybe there's room for improvement. Maybe we need to come back and tweak some things, which we did last year. We made some changes with input from law enforcement to ensure that they're able to do their jobs to keep us safe. There's more to do, I think, especially around ensuring that we've got funding and models for co-response, for navigators, for mental health and crisis support, to ensure that it's not police on the front lines all the time. But I'm eager to continue working with law enforcement to find the right solutions to keep our communities safe.
Thank you, Emily Randall. Spencer Hutchins, please go ahead.
There are things that we must absolutely fix and reverse that the legislature has done. I don't think that it is sufficient to say the legislature, was off the mark with some of these reforms. I think it's more appropriate to say recklessly and catastrophically wrong. We must repeal the police pursuit bill. When you talk to law enforcement, there is an absolute desperation, a frustration about being asked to do a job and not being given the tools to do it. That is untenable for our law enforcement community. We have to get our drug possession laws fixed. That we have allowed for essentially the elimination of our drug possession crimes, and it is something that we have to get back on track. I am very proud to be endorsed by the Council of Police and Sheriffs, the Fraternal Order of Police. This is the community that sees firsthand the recklessness of the state legislature when it comes to law enforcement. And I'm very glad to have their support as I go into the legislature and work to repeal and push back on these very, very unwise policies.
Thank you, Spencer Hutchins. Addison Richards, please go ahead.
This is an issue where on public safety, I do have experience to offer, having again sat in courtrooms with judges and prosecutors and law enforcement to talk about how to address issues like domestic violence and human trafficking, for example. And I'm grateful to have the support of the Kitsap County Sheriff and Kitsap County Prosecutor and many other first responders. I'm going on a ride along in the morning with a Pierce County deputy, one of the two that serves unincorporated Pierce County. And look, law enforcement need the funding, the tools, and the personnel they need in order to do their jobs and respond to violent crimes. We need them to respond to those things, and we need them to respond to car thefts, especially in places like the Key Peninsula, where a car is a lifeline for so many people. And so I'm also about bringing people together around the table, because everyone wants to live in a safe community. And I'm proud of my track record on doing that to this point and want to replicate it as a legislator. Thank you.
Thank you, Addison Richards.
Next question will also be 60 seconds, timekeeper, 60 seconds. And we'll start with Matt Macklin. What legislation do you propose to ensure affordable housing is available in your legislative district? Matt Macklin, please.
I think the first step to addressing affordable housing is to really get our arms around the causes. And the two primary causes are inventory issues and supply and demand issues. So the first is really the most important, and we don't have enough people that know how to build houses, period. That feeds back into the original plan about giving high school individuals or other individuals an opportunity to engage in these building trades earlier on, investing in apprenticeships in trades that build houses. I have the support of many of our unions, especially our building trades in this district. And that is their feedback, is that they have no slots available because they don't have the resources available to continue to these apprenticeships. So by investing in more slots, as we call them, in those apprenticeships is the first step toward a reality of having an inventory that's sustainable and has prices that are sustainable.
Thank you.
Short time.
Thank you. Emily Randall, please.
Thank you. So I also agree that we have a supply issue. We need to ensure that we're building more. And some of that is dealing with the red tape and building codes that are ever changing, that are, befuddling our contractors and our builders. We need to make sure that we're incentivizing growth smartly, like in dense areas, in areas that can handle more development in our urban growth areas. We don't need to be pushing for growth, in rural communities that want to stay rural. But we can do some interesting things with zoning by increasing, grandmother units, ADUs, ensuring that folks can build backyard cottages and maintain, the character of their community. But we also have to look at cost control measures. And, there's currently a statewide ban on rent control, which means that no cities or counties can set a limit on how many hundreds of dollars or what percentage of your rent can be increased at the end of your lease. And I think that's worth exploring.
Thank you. Spencer Hutchins, please.
I agree with what's been said when we say we have a supply and demand problem. I was just on the phone before this forum with a member of our community who I don't know, who just called me as a candidate to talk about her rent, to talk about the difficulty she is feeling in facing the cost of her housing. We have a problem in that we have very high demand and very low supply. Unfortunately, it is largely policy driven. 30 to 40% of the cost of a building project in our state is taken up in state and local fees and taxes. That means that when we go to provide housing, we are artificially inflating the cost. We are also making it very difficult for housing providers to actually do what they want to do, which is provide housing. And so when you limit the supply artificially, you drive up the cost when you have outsized demand. And we do have outsized demand. This to me is a humanitarian crisis when we look at not being able to provide housing for our community. And the state needs to lift the burden on housing providers to allow for more units to be available to people to afford to live in our community.
Thank you. Addison Richards, please.
In Washington, we are at the bottom in terms of the number of available units per person in the country. Our housing unaffordability and the increases that we're seeing in rent are pushing out people on fixed incomes, people that are just simply not making enough at work or experience a crisis like a health crisis. And that is contributing to our homelessness issue. In fact, the incredibly low number of available units for rent is directly linked to homelessness. And so this is an incredibly important issue. And I would agree that it comes through zoning and some changes to the Growth Management Act so that we're being really strategic about where we're growing out here on the peninsula and concentrating that growth in order to preserve rural communities, but then also putting pressure on Seattle, Lakewood, Tacoma, Everett, who are not meeting their growth management targets and acting like the big cities that they are. And so we've got some significant changes to do there to increase supply and address this issue.
Thank you. Michelle Caldier, please.
So I completely agree with Spencer's response and also want to piggyback on that and say that we need to fix the Growth Management Act. We need to make sure that there are more areas where people can build. We also need to help fix the supply chain shortage problem as well. And then on top of that, because it will take time before we can build to accommodate the number of people who are in our state. We need to think outside the box. One of the proposals that I have historically put forward is expanding a sharing program where people can rent out a room in their house for individuals who are on the verge of homelessness and having a reduced rate and then having a carve out to make sure that that situation will work out. So I will continue to work on that issue and also hopefully fix our supply chain issue.
Thank you.
This next question is the last question, and timekeeper, this will be a 60-second question. How have you demonstrated your commitment to anti-racism? Please give us specific examples of working with marginalized groups. Emily Randall, please go ahead.
Sure. As the first woman of color to represent our district growing up in a Chicano family, this is really central to, the lens that I bring to policymaking. It's important for me to ensure that neighbors who have been left out of policymaking conversations, neighbors for whom our Capitol building was not built, are involved in decision-making, are involved in policymaking. One example that I'll share is my work around expanding postpartum Medicaid. It took me 2 years to do it. The first year we passed it and the governor vetoed it at the beginning of the pandemic. The second year, after birth workers in communities of color voiced their concerns, we built a stronger coalition that was led by people who are experiencing higher postpartum maternal mortality rates and postpartum depression. And I think we got a stronger bill across the finish line.
Thank you, Emily Randall. Spencer Hutchins, please go ahead.
We started this session with a recognition of the native lands and the tribal heritage that we are surrounded by here in this community. And just a few weeks ago, we were, several of us were at an unveiling of something that I think is an absolutely beautiful symbol of our recognition of our native heritage here. And that is on the Gig Harbor waterfront. There was an honor pole, a story pole unveiled that honors the Squaboch band of the Puyallup tribe. And it was a beautiful moment to recognize the heritage that we're surrounded by, and to honor the ongoing Native American heritage that continues to live out in this community. I was proud on City Council to support that project and was really proud to see it unveiled. It's really important for us to remember that marginalized people in this community can often go unseen. And my work as the co-chair of the Fish Food Bank Capital Campaign, raising money to build a permanent home for the food bank, was just such a powerful opportunity for me to recognize the people in need who we can help continually through this process. So I was glad to be part of that as well.
Thank you, Spencer Hutchins. Addison Richards, please go ahead.
The vast majority of my legal career to this point has been spent working with people who can't afford a lawyer, and had the opportunity to work with many people who are marginalized and vulnerable in our society. I've been a member of the Bremerton NAACP, and I get to sing with a group called Awesome Praise up here in Bremerton. It's a multiracial choir, and I'm really grateful that they let me join them. But look, on this issue, I want to make sure that when we're talking about creating jobs for people, that we're creating jobs for all people. When we're talking about education, that we're making sure everyone has the opportunity to receive a quality education and no one gets left behind. And then when we're talking about healthcare access, all people should have access to quality, affordable healthcare, and we've got to make sure that our laws are not leaving folks from different communities behind, and that unfortunately has been a problem for us in the past, but we got to do better going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Addison Richards. Michelle Caldier, please go ahead.
So the first 4 years that I served on the Education Committee, and one of the most difficult charts that I personally saw was the breakdown of graduation rates between different ethnicities and also different cohorts. And below individuals who have developmental disabilities, below every single race, were children who are in foster care. And if you break that down even further, the majority of those children are children of color. And that was something that I am very passionate about. That's something that I've worked very hard on, is improving outcomes for our most vulnerable youth, especially children who are in foster care, and especially individuals of color, ensuring that they have transportation to make sure that they can stay at the same school of origin, making sure that they have improved their graduation rates, and fighting to make sure that they're either return home or have a permanent placement. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle Caldier. Matt Macklin, please go ahead.
Well, as a person of color myself, a multiracial individual, and one that comes from not a high income family, a low income family, I understand that plight. I went through it, and I was able, with a little bit of luck and a lot of love and sacrifice by my mom and dad, to be able to excel. I do very well for myself, and I'm proud of that. And along the way, I've made it a point to measure equity with everything I do, whether that be in healthcare and nursing homes, whether that be in the law practice and pro bono work, working with the Office of Civil Legal Aid, where I represent youth that no longer have parents. They're in that situation, whether it be working with the NAACP or working with the Office of the Mayor's Office of Education in Columbus, working with enrichment groups and underprivileged youth in West Side of Columbus. Everything that I seek to do, including in the legislature, will balance equity against the rule. We have to acknowledge and understand how we got here through the law, and that will help us understand and path a way of how we break free from the inequities that same law has established.
Thank you, Matt Macklin.
Now it's time for closing statements. Each candidate has up to 1 minute for their closing statement. We'll change the order of the opening statements. So we'll start with Spencer Hutchins, please.
As I've gone through this campaign, a consistent theme pops up. People are sick of our politics. They believe our politics have become toxic. And I share that concern. And if you, like me, are concerned about the direction that our state has been going in, with skyrocketing crime, increasing taxes, cost of living becoming unattainable and unachievable for people to pursue their goals and achieve their dreams, then I think it's very important to remember that the majority party has had single party control of the state government for many, many years. And if you share my concerns about the direction that we're going in, I hope you'll agree with me that the more the parties have to talk to each other, the better the policies will be that come out of the legislature for our community. I am endorsed by the News Tribune. I have hired a liberal Democrat as my campaign manager. What I seek to do in this campaign is to model how bipartisanship can happen. And I think that we need to have a legislature that is communicating across the parties to represent all people in our community and bring some balance back to Olympia. Thank you.
Thank you. Addison Richards, please.
The main reason that I'm running is to use the experience that I've gained the past few years to work on the issues that I hear about the most. Like I said at the beginning, rising costs and public safety. And these are not partisan issues. They're concerns that everybody has. And I want to go to work in the majority caucus to fight for this community. And you would be voting for a change from this district in terms of its representation and the voice and effectiveness that you're willing to have. I don't see the majority party changing. And I want to make sure that your voices are heard in there, and that our priorities are priorities, and that we have a voice again that is going to get results. And we've got so much to get done. We didn't really get to talk about the infrastructure needs of our community, but we've got to keep lowering bridge tolls. We've got to fix our bridges. We've got to get the Watch It On ramp fixed, because my car goes from 0 to 60 in 60 seconds. And there's just so much to get done. And I want to use the experience that I've gained in my love for this community. And I ask for your vote.
Thank you. Michelle Caldier, please.
Well, during the last 8 years that I've served in the legislature, I made a promise that I would listen to people regardless of where they stand on the political spectrum, and make the best judgment in terms of how to vote for every bill. I believe I have done that, and I have a proven track record of doing that. I read every email that comes through. I listen to every single person that I talk to, and I have to weigh, everybody in this district to make a decision. In addition, I have great working relationships across the aisle, and believe that I am the best candidate to continue to help figure out how to navigate these tough grounds in Olympia. And I would be honored to continue to serve and to continue to have your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Macklin, please.
As much as I can appreciate our current representatives and the effort they put through, the community has spoken to me. I feel that we have inadequately been represented, and that's why I'm running. We've had the same representatives in the House for nearly a decade, and we deserve more than just a vote that's cast. We need an advocate that's going to bring things home for us, and it's time for a change. I'll direct solutions that work for our community and actually bring things home for us. It's time for us to gain our fair share. When I decided to run, my primary motivator was equity. Second to healthcare. Funny enough, it's one of the most inequitable systems we see. We need to view every single piece of legislation that we seek to pass through a lens of equity that looks at our values as a community, including freedom, liberty, and the ability to bring home something for our family to sustain our lives. So I'm hoping and I'm requesting and I'm asking for your vote this November, because I'm the best candidate to bring things home for you that are inconsistent with your values.
Thank you. Emily Randall, please.
Thank you. You know, I'm proud of the work that we've been able to accomplish over the last 4 years. You know, just this last legislative session, 95% of the bills that passed and were signed by the governor had bipartisan support, not unanimous, but support from both sides of the aisle. And that is what politics is about for me. We go down to Olympia to solve problems, to make sure that we're bringing investments to our community, that we're building a better future together. And I think we've done a lot of that over these last 4 years, but we have so much more to do. We have work to invest in housing affordability and ensure that all of our neighbors have a safe, dry roof to sleep under, that we are protecting and preserving our freedom to make the choices about our bodies and our families that we've come to rely on in a state where we value abortion rights. We also have work to do around affordability and good jobs, ensuring that we can build the kind of future that we dream of. If you send me back, I will keep working hard alongside all of my colleagues.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
In ballot order, the Legislative District 26 candidates for Senate are Emily Randall and Jesse Young. For House Position 1, Spencer Hutchins and Addison Richards. For House Position 2, Michelle Caldier and Matt Macklin. Your ballot will be mailed out October 21st. Be sure to vote early and no later than November 8th. We would like to thank the candidates who participated, the timekeeper, Terry Baker, Tacoma-Pierce County League of Women Voters, and our community sponsors, the Affordable Housing Consortium, Asia Pacific Cultural Center, AAUW of Puyallup, Grit City Co-op, Latinx Unidos of South Sound, NAACP of Tacoma, Sumner Waller Community Association, the Tacoma Urban League, Vibrant Schools, and the YWCA of Pierce County.
Thank you very much for watching this. You can see other League of Women Voter candidate forums at lwvtpc.org. Read your voter's pamphlet, look at Vote 411, where you can find answers to questions posed to all candidates running for office. Read the candidate websites, and do all you can to be an educated voter. And please don't forget to vote on November 8th. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for participating. Have a good evening.